Welcome to the first episode of the RailCat Chat. I'm Matt Friedman. I'm joined by RailCat skipper Greg Tagert. Right now we're going to do some hot stove talk, try to keep you warm during this cold winter day. And welcome, Greg.
Well, thanks, Matt. It's wonderful being here, and anytime we can talk baseball is a good time. And before you know it, we'll be right back at it.
That's right, and we're looking forward to the 2013 baseball season just as much as you are there at home. And Greg, the first thing that I want to ask you about is that unlike in Major League Baseball, where the GM controls the player personnel decisions, in independent baseball, you have the unique role where as the manager on the field, you also get to construct the roster. Take us through the process from the end of the season in September all the way up to spring training of filling out your roster for the next season.
Well, Matt, certainly you hit upon it. That's the unique thing about the job and the attraction to most people that are in the position that I'm in is that you get a chance to negotiate with the players, scout the players, sign the players, manage those same players. So with that, you take on a role also where you almost attach yourself to the players, and it makes those decisions in the off season a little bit more unique in terms of making a decision on whether a player is returning or not. Now, several of those players are at a crossroads in their careers. We've seen the retirements of a couple of RailCats, longtime RailCats, notably Chris Carrera and Mike Rohde, who have decided to pursue other things in their life. And so you're always going to be faced with those things. And then most importantly, as you move forward, in the offseason, you make a decision on who may or may not return to the ball club. And there's always going to be turnover, whether you win a championship or whether you finish as we did, a disappointing season as it was for the RailCats. There's going to be turnover. And most importantly, you try to secure a core group of players that will reestablish themselves with that ball club. You bring in new products, so to speak, new players, throughout the offseason. But it's a number of phone calls, emails, texts as the day goes by. The differences in between this year and maybe years ago. But and there's a lot of contact between players. Try to let the players sit a little bit. That October, November, especially those players that need that mental break, the decision whether to continue their career or not. You don't try to pursue things, but as we sit here on January 15th, things will start to heat up, as you said.
And Greg, you touched on that point of talking about players who were here in the past, and that's your first focus, is talking to them and seeing if they are going to continue with the RailCats and if you would like to keep them. Well, you had a club in 2012 that finished at 50-50, but finished very strong, 19-9 in the month of August, 34-22 from July 4th on, which was the second best record in the American Association. So was there a feel there towards the end of the season that you were putting together kind of the core group of players that you're hoping can take you through this season and beyond?
Well, one of the things, Matt, that you and I discussed, and along with everybody else in our approach with our coaching staff as we entered into July, and we knew we were a struggling ball club, and what did we need to do to get better? And one of the things that you could wait till the off season, reevaluate things, but we took the time to say, hey, we've got to do some things right now, see where we're at, see where we can be. Now, first and foremost, we got a little younger. We added some players of that rookie classification, guys fresh out of college. Now, certainly you don't want to think, not to take any away from that group, a Zach Mitchell, a Kenny Bryant, a Trevor Willis, that group of players that joined us, but you do have to have experienced talent in this league to succeed. So we don't want to let the last half fool us either into thinking, hey, we're set and we're good to go. But it gave us at least a base of what we wanted to do, and that was get a little fresher, get a little younger, a little bit more athletic, and gear ourselves, not so much, it's not like Major League Baseball where we talk about 5 years down the road, but at least prepare ourselves for next year and the year after. And we think we've done that, with a good base of players that ended the season with us.
Now, Greg, we talked about some of those players from last year and what happens to them going forward. Also part of your job in the offseason, you're almost like a college football coach, a Brian Kelly or Nick Saban. You're a bit of a recruiter as well for some of the free agents out there that have their choice among different teams throughout independent baseball. So what is the Greg Tagert recruiting pitch for the RailCats? What are you trying to sell them on here? And also, those players have to sell themselves to you as well. What are some of the things that you're looking for from those players?
Well, one of the things, Matt, and you just hit upon it, that the recruiting type aspect, and it's really changed in the last 10 years. And I would say 10 years ago, the players weren't aware of independent baseball and the opportunities that are provided for them. So you really were educating the player a little bit. and not so much recruitment as much as education. Hey, this is a chance for you to continue your career. Well, right now, when we make a call to a free agent, or we make a call to an available player that just got released from organization, he's heard from 25 other clubs easily. You know, those good players are going to be called by everybody. That's the difference in the game now in the industry than it was 10 years ago. So you really are on a recruiting pitch. You know, some clubs have gone the way of virtual tours of their ballpark, of their stadium, of their success in the past. You know, they've taken that step. You know, mine is still more along the lines, I like to talk to the player. If he has an agent, I still like to talk to the player individually. And what we try to do, we want the player to research us as much as we research them. And that's really, I think, you know, it's worked well for the RailCats in the past, and it's something that will continue in the future because, you know, we say it about this isn't a place for everybody, but also we can provide an environment for guys that maybe don't fit in other places. And we think we've got a good thing going here, and we're going to continue to take that same approach. Now, certainly, you have to step up the game. Money negotiations at our level, not really the deciding factor. It really comes down, in most cases, for the good player, for the player who's concerned about his career, reaching the major leagues is still his goal. It still comes down to where's the best opportunity. Where is he going to get the most starts at as a pitcher? Is he going to be a starting pitcher, a reliever? Is he going to bat in the middle of your order? Does he get a chance to play shortstop instead of second base? These are the decisions that really the player has to really ask us in terms of questions and decisions the player has to make. We provide him with as many honest answers as we can. You know, we certainly never want to mislead the player. And, you know, at our level, you know, you're restricted to the number of players you can have under contract. So we try to be very particular with who we're going to go after. And that was the case with an early signing. We had Colton, a player that was sitting out there for a couple of years, a unique player, very talented, a player that was available. We don't mind taking a chance on a player early either in the process.
Now that's leading right into my next question, a good segue. I was going to ask about Colton, one of those guys that you recruited. He has not played since 2010, but he is a 30-year-old veteran outfielder. What do you think, or what do you hope he can bring to the team?
Well, you know, Chris was a player that had probably earmarked himself to return to baseball as early as last August. Began to speak with a couple of teams that he played for, former managers that he played for. You know, I talked with him in late September, you know, gauged his interest. And certainly, you know, it's not ideal to sign a player who hasn't been in the game in the last 2 years. But there was enough positives about Chris in his past, in his career, that we thought, hey, this is a guy that we want to take a chance on. And it certainly goes with our mindset, and our philosophy hasn't changed as it was last year or the year before. We're going to try outfield defense. Those three outfielders are important to the success of our ball club in our history and our future as anything. I really believe in that. And we had a chance to sign a premium center fielder defensively who was an offensive type impact guy. He'll remind a lot of former RailCat fans, or former RailCat Rob Marconi, that type of athleticism. So it's one of those things we thought was the time to take a good chance on, give him enough time to prepare for the season. And at the same time, you know, we'll keep our bases all covered though. You know, it doesn't mean we stop looking, but we felt good enough about Chris's situation. And there's not a lot of players who want to sign in late September or early October like Chris did. So we took that as a sign. Here's a player that wants to play. We think he'll be a real treat to the RailCat fans.
Greg, you talked earlier about the retirement of a couple of RailCat fan favorites, Mike Rohde and Chris Carrera. So you have a hole there at first base and one at second base that you'll look to fill. What do you look at, I guess, as the main holes on the roster that you're still looking to fill before spring training?
Well, certainly you just nailed it right there with first base. We think that is a critical position for us, that first base, DH role. You know, and certainly Chris vacated a spot at second base, but at the same time, you know, with the injuries that Chris faced during the season, we had a chance to look at a couple different people, including a young player, or two young players who impressed us, Chase Tucker and Zach Mitchell. Now, we also had a couple guys at that first base position that we liked enough. You saw the signing of Kenny Bryant, you know, somebody that we thought highly of. Now, do we go into the offseason knowing that, hey, we're going to sit there with 2 or 3 rookies manning the right side of the infield? You know, that's not the intention. However, we do feel good enough about that talent that perhaps those guys can have success at our level. Now, we're going to continue to look, you know, and certainly the right guy comes along. If Albert Pujols calls the RailCats and says he wants to play, we're not going to turn him down. But we're going to continue to look and strive and make sure we're good. But we also want to stay with that philosophy, as I said, we felt like in 2012, what had happened was really, and it started in 2011, the end of a real dynamic run for us, but an end in terms of the core group of players. You just mentioned Mike Rohde, Chris Carrera, two guys that have been with the club longer than anybody. And what had happened is, as much as you would like to return those players each and every year, that time's going to come. I don't know if we did a good enough job, and I'm the first one to admit that maybe we weren't prepared, for the turnover as much as it happened in that 2011-2012 season. And again, with what happened and transpired with the club, some of the retirements of players or defections, we just were not prepared. And we were a little older than our clubs have been in the past when we started last season. And our stated goal was, all right, we've got to get a little younger. We've got to reestablish that core group. And we think we have some guys. Now, without speaking too much further, and we've got the two best players in my mind in the league, and that's always a good base to start with, and that's Mike Massaro and Adam Klein. And I know we'll probably touch upon them, but when you can start with those two guys at the top end of your roster, then the rest of your job really falls into place, I think.
Now, one other hole that the RailCats will be looking to fill is on your coaching staff.
Okay.
Mick Curran, the hitting coach who's been a part of your staff for 4 years, is going on now to manage in the Western Major Baseball League. So he will not be on the staff anymore. What is the search going like for your new hitting coach?
At this time of the year, and certainly when we're looking for candidates, we wait almost till the Major League season. It's just like looking for a player. We wait till the Major League hiring process goes down. We start looking at some candidates who are out there. It's an attractive position, and really basically because of the type of people we've had, the talent we've had at that position, at our hitting coach position, it goes without saying. Going back for Andy Haynes, Brian Nelson, Kenny Graham, the look at the success that these guys have had after being here means the one thing that I take a lot of pride in is we've done a good job in hiring the right person. And these guys have been outstanding. Mick was outstanding in this role for us as he developed into a very, very good coach. He's going to get a chance to run his own program, a great experience for him. And we'll continue to look. Right now the process is we've talked to several candidates. We'll try to narrow that field down a little bit as we move closer to February.
Now, you touched on the names, so I'll bring it up again about Adam Klein and Mike Massaro. Obviously, RailCats fans looking at transactions haven't seen them signed yet, but are you confident, I suppose, going into the 2013 season that they will be back?
Right. I'm confident, and certainly it's two guys. When I mentioned the two best players in the league, I mean that sincerely. Now, that goes along with that is the pay scale. And certainly when we negotiate salaries for players and when we negotiate contracts, the process this year really started with the younger group of players. I think you've seen Morgan Combs, Esteban Uriaga, some of our younger group, those players that we said we want to establish a core, those are the players we really wanted to take care of first in terms of getting their salaries, getting their contracts taken care of, and then we'll move forward with a little bit more of the experienced player, which includes Adam and Mike. But I'm very confident from everything they've told me. Everything, playing for the RailCats is very important to those guys. And when you ask what do we look for in a RailCat, that's the number one thing. Is it important when he walks into this clubhouse, when he walks into this environment, the success of our franchise, the organization, everything we represent in the community, is that important to the player? Well, if it is, we're on the right track.
To wrap up this episode, Greg, we're going to actually step away from a RailCats topic, but stay on baseball. I know that there are few baseball fans who are bigger fans of baseball than you are, and just recently in the news was the fact that the Baseball Writers of America did not induct anybody into the Baseball Hall of Fame for 2013, and as a big baseball fan, what was your opinion on that?
Matt, you and I had a chance to discuss this a little bit, and I'll reiterate, I think it was the best thing for the game, for the fans, for everybody involved, including the players. And I know the players' union in Major League Baseball, the strongest union probably in all the country, there were some upset people. However, I think for the controversy that surrounds, and I almost hate that phrase, the steroid era, as it's being called about, even the talk of a certain wing at the Hall of Fame for those things. I don't know if you can make those kind of designations, but at least for this year, I think it was the best thing for the game and for everybody involved, including those players themselves, when you start talking about the guys who were excluded, and certainly, a Barry Bonds or a Roger Clemens. I just think for the environment that would be placed and for such a hallowed ground as the Hall of Fame in Major League Baseball, which it is, that induction ceremony in July, I think, would have taken on a tinge of controversy that's not needed for the game right now, and especially as we're trying at every level to make sure this game grows and prospers and is fan-friendly. I'm not so sure if that was the most fan-friendly, way to do it if anybody had been inducted. And certainly, I think you'll see in the future that mindsets and you see what happens every day in the news. You never know what will take place in the future, but there's enough good players out there. There's enough Hall of Fame type players that the Hall of Fame will go on just fine.
That's RailCats manager Greg Tagert. Greg, thank you very much
for
joining us, and we will be back throughout the off season with more of the RailCat Chat, so stay tuned to the RailCats YouTube channel.